I think when you're told that something may not happen, you have to then play the scenarios of like, what are you actually missing? How much does it matter to you? My only greed at this point in my life is to create more memories.
That's Michael Perry, founder and CEO of Maple. And this is Make Yourself at Home, the podcast that takes you into the homes of people you admire to show you a side you don't usually get to see. I'm Kristen Twyford, and every week we'll talk to someone at the top of their career to explore holistic success and how work and home are inextricably intertwined. Along the way, we hope to inspire you to live well, whatever that means to you. Make Yourself at Home is presented by Nines, the household management app designed to help you manage your home and everything that comes with it, so you can live with ease. Today, we're in Michael Perry's home in Santa Barbara, California, where he lives with his wife and 2 young sons. Here, he's building Maple, an app that helps parents take the stress out of planning and organizing their homes. Michael is a serial entrepreneur. His company Kit was acquired by Shopify, and he spent years making life easier for small business owners. Then, a difficult journey to becoming a parent changed everything, from the way he leads people and the mission he works towards, to the way he approaches each moment with his kids. Make Yourself at Home with Michael Perry. Michael, thank you so much for having us into your home. We're so excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to have you in my home. Excited to join.
Me too. And we both really have a love of home. To start out, go ahead and set the stage for us. Tell me about your home and where you're sitting.
Well, I'm currently sitting in Santa Barbara, California. That's where my family and I live. Mm-hmm. We are in the process of building kind of our forever home down here. And so my family and I are very fortunate to be living on a construction site in a little 2-bedroom guest house that we have on the property. So the 4 of us and our 2 dogs are toughing it out here in Santa Barbara, but there's no better place to tough it out. And I am taking this call from our kitchen, our dining room, family table, kitchen kind of eating area. So, work from home life.
And you and your family just moved to Santa Barbara recently, right? What made you make that move?
Yeah, I mean, we made the decision in 2020 that we wanted to, relocate our family down here. Right before the pandemic started, my wife and I were kind of splitting our time between Napa County and the Bay Area. And I think when you grow up in a city, you just, for some reason, by default, believe you're a city person. And I grew up in Oakland, and spending time kind of like off the grid in like a quieter environment and having a little bit more like childhood normalcy mattered a lot for my wife and I to provide our children's with. Riding your bike down the street, going to the park, being a kid for those 10 years. And when we started looking at places of where that should take place, Santa Barbara started to become like the very obvious choice. My wife and I made just a decision and a commitment that we wanted to be as greedy as we could for the first 12 or 13 years of our kids' lives, where we knew we were going to be a big priority for them in terms of how they wanted to spend their time. And no better place we felt to do that than down here.
And what does home mean to you?
Home to me is where my children are. And I think that there's nothing that matters more to me than my children. And so kind of similarly, when my wife and I took the time to build our home down here, we recognized that if someday our children decide to live somewhere else on earth, even though home may feel like Santa Barbara, we're going to go to wherever our kids are at. Proximity to where our children are is like what feels like home. So our home is our children.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious how you got to this point, because on this show, we really love to talk about that intersection between home and work. And I know that that's a topic that you really care about as the founder and CEO at Maple. But I can imagine that it's taken a while to get to this place where home is where your children are. And that hasn't always been the case because you haven't always been a parent. So what did success look like to you, when you were first starting out, and how has that changed over time? If you think back to the beginning of your career, what were you working towards?
Well, I want to answer that kind of in 3 quick parts if I can. One is, I don't think anyone knows what real love is, or is able to create that clear line priority until you actually have children. People can tell you all day long, having kids will change your life, or you've never experienced love the same way until you've had children. But until you really have that and experience that, you don't understand the impact of how true that actually is. So to your point, I think my life in the last 4 years and my viewpoints on life have radically changed. But I certainly had a really special experience that happened to me in my 20s when I was building my last company. My wife's grandmother, who became kind of a grandmother to me as well, she got very sick and was inevitably going to pass away. And so we spent the last 8 weeks of her life living with her inside of a senior citizen's home and living in her apartment. And it was amazing to me because I was a young entrepreneur, and my whole belief of like what success was at that time was, what kind of company did you create? How much money did you amass? What kind of accolades? What kind of impact? How many people did you hire? So much of success was seated in what you were able to accomplish as a professional. And interestingly enough, when I was staying in the senior citizens home for 8 weeks, you basically talk to any person in later stages of life, and none of them wanted to talk to you about their business. None of them wanted to talk to you about their professional accomplishments. Every single person in the sage years of wisdom was what their children were doing and where their grandchildren were going to school, and wanting to show you pictures of their kids and wanting to tell you stories about what their kids or grandchildren have been up to. And it became very clear to me in that moment that in the end of life, you really do have the moment of clarity that your life's work is not the businesses that you built, but the family you create. And I just took that as a unique opportunity at that point to recognize that, there was going to become a time where my family was going to become priority uno. I didn't really understand the magnitude of what that shift was going to be, but I knew that shift was going to happen. And so I would say actually up until the moment there's kind of two parts, that moment of really realizing that people didn't care as much in the end, and then the moment of finding out that my wife and I may not biologically be able to naturally conceive children, and a doctor telling me I may not have a family in the more traditional way, really gave me moments of pause about what success actually looked like in my life.
Right. How close were those two moments? Was that soon after you had that experience living in that facility that you started thinking about having kids?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the living in the senior citizens home took place in 2013. Mm-hmm. I lived in a senior citizens home basically from July 2013 to September 2013. And then the realization that we may not have children took place in summer 2017. So it was about 4 years apart. And directly in the middle, in 2016, I sold my company. And I remember being in Montreal in a hotel room and thinking to myself shortly after we had this conversation with our doctor that professionally speaking, I felt like I had kind of achieved my childhood dreams. I started off, my mother was a waitress, my father was a car salesman. We lived in a, very humble household. And I just was, the very American dream rags to riches story, and had, won the Forbes bullshit awards and all the things that I thought mattered so much. And then I'm sitting in this hotel room in Montreal, and at the same time feeling like I absolutely had nothing at all. Like I had nothing. The one thing that I wanted, I wasn't going to be able to have. And I think, life comes at you in a million different ways, but you really don't realize how badly you want something until someone really tells you may not actually have that. We didn't get to just get lucky, so to speak, or pull the goalie or let the universe kind of decide. We had to take a more intentional path. And so those moments were just such defining moments for me, either by way of elder people telling me what life was really about, or by a doctor just telling me I may not have what I ultimately wanted. And comparing that to hearing that when I was a poor entrepreneur, and then feeling that when I was a successful entrepreneur, and just realizing that there's so much truth to it,
Yeah. And I can imagine, after you have this sort of revelation living with your wife's grandmother and you're thinking, okay, this is the path that I want my life to be on. And your version of success is kind of evolving. And then to be told by somebody, oh, you can't have that now, had to be a really tough moment.
Maybe the hardest of my life, and just like in an earth-shattering way. Like when I was growing up, my family was very clear that your only currency was love. Your only real currency was family. And I don't know if that was just an easy way of coping with not having a lot of financial security, but we were a family that my family immigrated here from Portugal and Italy less than 100 years ago. We would sit around the table on Sunday nights. My grandmother cooked for everybody. My aunt and my mother were waitresses together. Like family was the nucleus of everything. And to accomplish so much professionally, to only find out that you may not be able to have the one thing you actually wanted your life to be defined by. It just puts it all in check. I think that there's that great quote. I can't remember if it's Socrates. I hate to misquote somebody, but a healthy man has 1,000 wishes, but a sick man has one. And I think in a lot of ways, when people are going through a reproductive journey, and you're finding out that you might, have reproductive challenges ahead, a couple that's going through it, they only have one wish. They only have one wish, and that wish is to have a family, to get pregnant. And it just puts so much in perspective about what actually matters in the scheme of life.
Mm-hmm. I think nobody can really understand unless they've been through that. And so for you, you all went through this very tough time, and then you decided to talk about it more publicly. Take me back to that process and, how you all felt going through it, and then why you decided to talk about it so publicly.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I think, a few moments in life you just really remember. And for some reason, I can remember perfectly sitting in that doctor's office and hearing, some troubling news that we were going to have some reproductive problems, that we basically had realistically two options to have a family. One was to try in vitro, try IVF, or to adopt a child. But that like going home and having sex and having a baby was just biologically was not going to happen. And just the pain and feeling so alone on that car ride home. And then attending my first IVF clinic at UCSF, and like kind of feeling like everybody was kind of going through this, but no one was talking about it. No one knew while we were attending all of our friends' baby showers that we were experiencing such troubling, hard times, and my wife and I had been together for a really long time, married for a long time. And people are like, why aren't you guys having kids? Why aren't you having a baby? And just like the amount of times we left a baby shower crying in a 2-year period, right? And so we decided when we got pregnant, not really actually thinking much of it, that we were going to just be honest that, it's been a road, and that thank God for science, and that we were able to successfully get pregnant by way of IVF. And it just turned into just this overwhelming outpour from people who I think felt just very similar, felt very isolated, felt very scared. There is a current wave, I think, of support that's becoming more familiar with IVF, but we're going, 5+ years back at this point. My son's 4, and we obviously carried a pregnancy for 9 months. And so, when you go back 5 or 6 years, I didn't know another couple that had gone through IVF at that point, or at least not one that was willing to talk about it. And so I think that the response was just kind of sad in its own way, beautiful, but sad in its own way, that so many people were living in isolation, or that just didn't know how to take something on, because it's really quite scary. If you have someone telling you might not get pregnant, and then you look at the percentage chances of IVF, you need a community to rally behind you. And so my wife and I have made a lifelong commitment to support others' reproductive journeys, to be a friend, to have a conversation. Philanthropically, we're heavily involved in IVF research, and just recognizing that it's such a cool way to have a kid. It's a painful way. It's an emotionally taxing way. It's a spiritually taxing way, but such a unique way to get to have a child, that just trying to bring some normalcy to that.
Absolutely. And you mentioned how, on our prep call, how hard it is for the partner, which obviously it's going to be hard
It
for
is.
the woman who's carrying the baby. But from your perspective, there was a different sort of isolation that you went through as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things that I think a lot that doesn't get talked about enough. One is the guilt. You feel, I mean, you're watching somebody go through hundreds of injections. You're watching somebody go through um, estrogen. You're watching a lot, right? You're watching people take hormones, drugs. In some cases, depending on the partner, procedure, fallopian tube removal, egg removal. Like you're watching a tremendous amount, and then you're sitting on the sidelines and you're taking none of it on. I took zero injections in the process of us getting pregnant. My wife, probably between miscarriages and two children, has approached 1,000 injections, right? Um, and so there's a lot of like just real, it's almost survivor's guilt, real guilt going on. Um, Kind of matched with the fact that, um, my wife was a patient to getting pregnant. And I was, in theory, a guest of the patient. And so there is this which I would love to see hospitals really rethink. But there's this reality that, like, I was outside of just providing a sperm, I was not really needed to be a part of the process. I don't have to be a part of the process. I don't have to go to doctor's appointments. I don't have to be there to even, I mean, our son Solomon, our second son, it was during COVID that my wife got pregnant. And, I like waited in the car for 45 minutes. I wasn't even allowed to attend the embedding process because of COVID. So like my wife got dropped off at the hospital. I sat in a car. I waited for about an hour and she came out and was like, okay, we're successfully embedded. And it's like, I think that there's a lot of just like opportunity to make it feel a bit more inclusive with that journey. There's weird things that people don't talk about. I never came home to a we're pregnant surprise. I never saw a successful pregnancy. I've never seen in my household a successful pregnancy stick, right? So it's a very different experience and there's disappointment associated to that for the partner as well, right? So it's a very different experience that I think needs to feel a little bit less scientific, even though it's beautiful that it is scientific, and a little bit less transactional and a little bit more like human, a little bit more inclusive, and a little bit more feeling of a team versus like a patient guest experience. And
Mm-hmm.
when you match that with no community support, it's really kind of sad.
It is sad. And I think even beyond that lack of community support, I think like you said, it's often such a quiet struggle where people go through this and they're not talking about it. So it's hard when you leave that baby shower, but it's also hard to go about your everyday life, to go to work every day. And I think there's this trap of thinking that in a post-COVID world, we're like all in each other's homes, we're on Zoom calls and we're seeing each other in the home. And there's sort of this like conflated sense of home and work. And yet everybody's going through something that, you don't know the burden that they're carrying.
I mean, the IVF journey, quite honestly, was one of the best wake up calls for me on a human level, right? Because from the outside world, I had just sold my company. My wife and I look like we're happy as hell, bought a house, bought our dream car, like everything is peaches and cream and good. And on the flip side, we're going to bed every night quite sad. After my wife's first miscarriage, we decided to take a vacation. We had been through it. Like we had just been absolutely through it, right? Like we've gone from basically, you're not going to have a baby to some pretty serious procedures, to egg removal, to like the whole bit, to then having our first miscarriage. And we were feeling, to be honest with you, I think we were feeling the darkness of life, right? Like, oh my God, this may not work for us. It was not positive thoughts. And so, we take this vacation and like people do, we're posting on Instagram and every comment's like, oh my God, looks like you guys are on such a dream vacation. Life looks so amazing, this and that. And like little did anyone know at that time, because we weren't publicly talking about it at that time, we were basically like crying over our food and we were basically taking a trip to try to buy happiness back. And that in itself is a privilege that most people who are going through these very sad, dark life events are getting up and going back to work the next day. And so it just humanized me in such a deep way that like my wife and I have said, we're never going to ask anybody why are they not having kids. We're never going to ask anybody when are they thinking about having kids. We're never going to go there with couples because we were the couple that were lying basically to say, oh, we're not ready yet, or oh, someday, or oh, whatever. But really just like immensely struggling behind the scenes. And I think it just says so much about real life that we optically see what we want to believe on Instagram, or we see what we optically want to believe on Facebook or Snapchat or TikTok or whatever your poison is that you enjoy to intake. And little do we know that is all like groomed storytelling that you only see 5% of reality. The other 95% is so messy and so beautiful, but so messy. And so I think as a society have to do a much better job of being empathetic because we don't know what's going on behind closed doors.
Absolutely. So then now, if you think about those moments, how do you think that time really impacted your sense of purpose and how you wanted to live every day?
I would say that my EQ has become on overdrive. I think that kindness is the most underrated trait of a human being. I don't know why we have become such a hard, semi-jaded society, why we kind of are like hard to our core. Like we walk around with like our defensibility way up. When really I think that what we all need to afford one another is grace and kindness. And I think that there was a time in my life where out of just the depths of trying to survive, of trying to make it on earth and trying to make it in the world of entrepreneurship, I didn't really know what trying to make it meant. Trying to make it was like build your business, have financials. But really for most people, trying to make it is surviving the day. Like getting through the day is hard for a lot of people. And so I think that journey taught me kindness is everything. It's just absolutely everything. And I think it became very pivotal because my value systems and how I wanted to spend time on earth, especially in the post-birth experience, after having a son, my life took a 180-degree swing. And there's most of the regret that I've had in my life is really from these learning experiences of how I was showing up and treating people in the past versions of myself, right? I'm happy that I had the awakening of what actually matters, but now I'm disappointed with how I showed up in the past. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for me to make that up in the future of just leaning and leading from a place of empathy and kindness that may have not always been the case.
Yeah. How do you see that playing out professionally now?
I mean, this sounds very weird to say as a founder, and Maple's still a relatively small company, but we have goals and aspirations for it to become a big company someday. And I think that mission of that business has a unique chance to not just transform the home, but transform the value system and work culture that is so toxically bad right now. And I think that what's oftentimes been very important, which was not the case in the past, was that in the past, I believed you needed to prioritize work and you needed to I'm paying you, you need to give me the best of yourself. And to some extent, that is true still. We pay our employees and we want them to show up and to do their jobs, but not at the expense of missing their son's baseball game or missing their daughter's soccer practice or missing life events. Because the reality of it is, and I say this often, and I think it's important that all leaders recognize this and they say this, is that we are not a family at Maple, we're a team at Maple. Your family's at home. And I'm not going to show up at your bedside when you're sick. At the end of your life and you have whatever you have going on and it's time for you to transition, your children will be at your bedside. Your children will be holding your hands. Their world is the world that's going to be affected. Their world is going to change forever, right? My grandfather passed away in June, on June 7th. We're approaching the 1-year anniversary of that. May he rest in peace. The world went on. The world moved on, right? My world has not moved on. Like, I still think about him every single day. I still miss him every single day. There's no amount of money I wouldn't pay right now to just have one more cocktail with him. right? And so when you have that level of clarity about like the truth, you are a poor leader to not provide an arena for people to live that truth. And so
Mm-hmm.
I take that super seriously because I'd be a hypocrite otherwise. And I think that more leaders need to step into that reality.
Completely agree. And I think it's very interesting to me that one of your, main principles at Maple is really thinking about how to advance gender equality at home and at work. And
Mm-hmm.
I think historically, gender equality has been something that we talk about in terms of the workplace. But now,
Yes.
thinking about it in the home is really a conversation that's starting to gain traction, thanks to people like you and Eve
Yes.
Rodsky and Reshma Saljani and all of these people who are kind of bringing this to the forefront. So, why do you feel
Yes.
like it's so important to look at it from this other angle, from the home?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think equality is important, period.
Right.
That goes past the home, that goes past the workplace. This is a human issue. We have built a society and a system where there is a pecking order of ease. And it's incredibly important for us to recognize that pecking order of ease. And for the people that sit further up that food chain, so to speak, and that's a terrible way of looking at it, but for the people that have it the easiest, they have a social obligation as a member of our human society to flatten that pyramid, right? Not to maintain it, but to level it. And so what I find fascinating is that, certainly you and I, we live in a generation where, we have created inclusion committees and diversity committees in the workplace. There's a tremendous amount of emphasis on creating more equal opportunity at work, right? We want to fight for the pay gap. We want to fight for all these things because it's important for us to see each other as equals. But yet, for some reason, when we go back to that, like at the end of your life statement, your actual life's work, we don't want to bring up this conversation that inside of our four walls, inside of the most important place of where we do business, we are not treated as equals. We don't view the world from a place of equality, right? We view this world from this, and I think that it's hurting men and I think it's hurting women for a lot of different reasons, right? I don't think that men have to, I'm not running down the street with a bow and arrow trying to shoot an antelope. So it's like the idea of having to be a hunter and gatherer and like living in this caveman society of expectations should be sunset. And we should allow ourselves to still be a fabric of the home and a new version of that home, because I think that what that creates is a more center of gravity of happiness for that core purpose that you're doing it together. And I just think it's time that we recognize that it's not 1950 anymore, where 6 out of 10 children had kids at home and mom played a role and dad played a role, but that it's 2023 and mom is in the workforce and dad's in the workforce, and that we all have to have this equal approach to participating in happiness. And I think that moms are quietly drowning out there, and I don't think it's fair.
Mm-hmm. And so now when you think about what you've set out to do, how does that actually play out in practice, both in your own life at home and in how you're leading Maple?
Well, I'll start at my home
Mm-hmm.
because that's really the nature of how I want to show up as a human being, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for my dogs barking. We're in my house, so I apologize about that.
Exactly. It's authentic.
Um, I feel like I had a really unique opportunity early on in my relationship. Um, so it's hard for me because I don't know, it's really easy to be where I'm at today and to say like, this is how I feel, but I don't know without these like really critical life moments if I would have turned out the same way, if that makes sense. When I was building my company, I wouldn't have been able to do that um, without like the deep support of my at time girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she was the first person. I was selling cars, and she was the first person to say, you really want to be an entrepreneur, you should just go for it. And what that meant was at the end of the day, she was going to do breast cancer research during the day and then wait tables at nighttime. And that meant that she was working a second job to help pay our company bills. And so what was weird was while I was building this company, and I ended up selling that company, and we ended up getting married and the whole thing prior to selling the company, is that I took a lot of credit for her sacrifice. Um, and I think it goes so unspoken that Kit does not exist as a company. The acquisition story does not happen. My time at Shopify does not happen. Maple as a company does not happen unless 10 plus years ago, my girlfriend took on a second job waiting tables to pay our server bills while I didn't work. Um, and so like there has to be like on my end, a like a realization that like her and I were partners and she got no credit for my success.
Was there an aha moment that helped you realize that?
I think it was more so like the just unconditional love of somebody believing in me. And it just so happened that it was my life partner believing in me and recognizing that I had special gifts. And I'm sure that this takes place in a lot of different arenas, whether that's family supporting some sort of musical talent or an actor or whatever. But my wife realized I was very, very, very creative and I was good at what I did, and that she believed in me when the world didn't. And I think that that like limitless love, that unlimited love, um, like it makes you would be out of touch not to step back and feel like immense gratitude just for that, just to have someone believe in you, and then for someone to sacrifice for your well-being, for your dreams. You know, your parents sacrifice for your dreams, but how many life partners sacrifice for someone else's dreams? um, I was just overwhelmed. And then the hard part always came with like the success of the company. You know, my business partners didn't get a lot of credit. It's, you know, everyone wants to focus on the founder. Everyone wants to focus on the CEO. But like, that's just not really how the story goes. It's a lot of people leaning in. Um, and so when that was all happening, I realized in that moment that my wife and I, we were not just husband and wife. We were co-founders to life. And we were going to build everything together. And I was going to support her on her ambitions and her journeys and her goals and her vision for us. And she was going to support me on my goals and my visions and my ambitions and my dreams for us. And that we were going to build, when the time came that we could do investments together, it wasn't going to be like, and I see this often still, a lot of people are like, the guy does the investing, the growth. It's like, we were going to do it together. It was always going to be about us. And when you put it in a position of us versus you own this and I own this and it's me versus you and it's my career versus your career, then it becomes this like very weird competitive dynamic. But like we're winning together. We're in this together. And so I think that there's like, you know, how people turn out is oftentimes really complex in many different layers. You know, I watched my dad and my mom operate in very traditional gender relationships, which oftentimes came at the expense of my mom just like doing it all and struggling and powering through it. And I just didn't want that life for my wife. And I also just don't want that life for my sister. And I don't want that life for my son's future partners if they choose to be in heterosexual relationships. And just being like very, very intentional about the fact that my wife is not my employee. She doesn't work for me. And she's not a second-class citizen in the house that we're building together. And just being in complete awe and also just in the depths of sadness that the world is continuing to exist in this unnecessary way. Because I find that life is so much better when you come at it from a place of equality. It's just so much better. And just thinking like, how can I take that life vision for myself? And really at the end of the day, you know, you want your kids to look up to you. You want your kids to see you as the teacher. You want your kids to model themselves after your mistakes and your strengths. You want them to learn from the good and want them to learn from the bad. You're not going to bat 1,000. I'm unwilling to let my kids learn from me not being a good husband. I want them to learn from me being the husband and partner that I'm supposed to be.
And then when you think about leading Maple and you have that perspective for your own family, how do you empower everybody on your team to live in the same way?
Well, I've always believed that there's a certain lack of authenticity when you feel like you have to be one person at home and one person at work. I'm just Michael Perry, and my only actual title is dad, right? The only thing that in my life that is non-reversible, that cannot change, is father. right? And so I'm founder and CEO of Maple for a short time. I'm father for the rest of my life. And so I default to that baseline of who I am, what my actual title and responsibility is to this society. And I show up as that person for every job, for how I show up in my friendships, how I show up in my workplace, how I show up in my household. It's that how would I want my children see me show up? How would I want to lead them? And how do I be that person for everybody else? And so in my company in Maple, I expect that we treat each other as equals. We operate from a place of kindness, and that we put our families first, because I wouldn't want their own children to feel like they are a lesser than priority than their work. I would hope that our employees' children feel like that mommy and daddy's priorities are their kids. And somehow Maple still continues to operate under this way successfully, and we feel very thankful for that. We'll see if we can scale that, but we feel thankful for that today.
And you're on this mission at Maple to help other people do the same. You're a 4-time founder. Is the pressure worse this time because you're on this mission that is so incredibly personal to you and you are the customer of the product that you're building?
Yeah, without a doubt. This is the most pressure felt I've ever felt. It would feel the most personal to fail. That's for sure. I feel, it's hard to read the thank you emails. It keeps you going, but the emails we get in from feedback, the struggles when we talk to parents, the last companies I did, the focus was to help people make money. And I felt very good that I helped people make money. This company, if all works well, it's really to give them a better quality of life around the most purposeful job that they will ever experience while their time is here on earth. And so to fail at that once in a lifetime opportunity to build a company that has the potential to simplify and power our life's work, it's the greatest. I think it's a harder challenge than getting to Mars because families are so complex. There's no science behind this. It's a societal issue. And I also recognize every day that there's a big chance that I could fail. And I work really hard every single day to ensure that my chances of that decrease. But it's a hard, hard, hard problem, and that we have a really great team of people committed to it. And again, interestingly enough, even in the question itself, it started with you're a 4-time founder in this net, but no one at Maple wants Maple to fail. Everyone is treating it like they're a founder, and everyone's working really, really hard because I think that when you have a team of parents, they understand the problem at such a deep level. But there's no doubt in my mind that this will be my last software company. And that's because I don't want to give myself an exit that I have another chance. I have to make this work.
Wow. And now you have 2 kids. You have this business that
Yes.
you care so much about. As you look
Yes.
back at the past 5-ish years and think about where you are now, are you surprised at where you are? And how do you think those moments have affected the way that you live today and the way that you look at the world today?
I mean, I'm surprised at where I'm at because someone told me I wasn't going to have children, or the likelihood of us having children were very small. And I think when we had one son, we thought we were blessed. The idea of having 2 sons feels absurdly overwhelming. 5 years ago, I had no intention of leaving Shopify. I had no intention of being a servant to anyone other than small business owners. And now I think that I've dedicated my life and my servitude to helping parents. And I was not a fighter for equality. I was a fighter to be a good human back then. But I think that most people who follow me or know me, they recognize that I'm trying very hard to leverage my own privilege and to cannibalize the simplicity of life that I have, right? To a detriment of my own ease. I would like life for everyone else to be easier. And just making this absurd commitment of being that I would like to be treated as an equal. I'm not treated as an equal, right? the reality is that I'm treated different than everybody else on earth because I'm a straight, white, privileged, financially secure male. So I'm not treated equal. And so to find that path to be treated like everybody else or to bring everybody to my experience one way or another, um, none of that existed 5 years ago. And so I'm very proud of where I'm at today. I think if you love who you are and how you're spending time on earth, you are an absurdly gifted individual. And my time on earth is spent basically between creating memories with my kids and trying to demonstrate to them as two white men that our work is never finished on trying to create a better place for everyone that exists inside of it.
And as you spend time with your kids, after being told this is never going to happen, what does that mean to you, and how do you think it impacts the way that you spend your time and the way that you parent?
Well, I can tell you for certain, and something that I'm super proud of, I've never one time complained about having to change a diaper. I think when you're told that something may not happen, you have to then play the scenarios of like, what are you actually missing? How much does it matter to you? I didn't know if I was going to have boys or girls at that time, but like the thought of not walking a daughter down the aisle, even somebody now who has two sons, still hurts me to miss out. I'm greedy for life experiences. My only greed at this point in my life is to create more memories. And I'm doing that now. I'm getting exactly what I want. I'm watching my kids ride their scooters and bikes down the street. I've got to change diapers. I've got to be thrown up on. I've got to do bath time. I got to have a birthday party. I've pulled all-nighters. I've dealt with my kids both being sick. I've dealt with both of my kids being healthy. I've got to hear giggles. I've got to hear meltdowns. I got to experience life. You can't ask for life experiences and think it's just going to be butterflies. And so if you're really optimizing for life, then when life is coming at you, you have to be thankful for that. And my wife and I made this incredibly deliberate decision to experience this life. And she went through hell to give us this life. My wife gave us this life. And so I would be incredibly selfish and incredibly ignorant to not feel overwhelmingly grateful for all that comes with that.
Yeah, it really sounds like you've taken the time to really slow down and enjoy each moment just because it's all very precious. You weren't sure that it was going to happen.
I mean, I never understand people who want to rush through this. Like we get one admission ticket and the ride doesn't go in reverse. It's just like you get on it and at some point you get off. Like I just deleted Instagram and Twitter and all that shit off my phone because in itself, it was just too distracting from the moment. I guarantee if anyone thought that they would spend their last day on earth looking at reels on Instagram, they would probably delete it off of their phone. And so, it's just fleeting. It's so short. So it's like, give it all you got and be thankful while you have it.
Mm-hmm. Moving forward, what does a meaningful life look like to you?
So I think I'm on a path right now. I think I'm finally on a path to living a meaningful life. What that should look like is somebody that got to watch their children grow up, got to share their life experiences for better or worse with their kids, got to witness their kids having their first real life experiences, becoming parents themselves, getting married, graduating high school, failing, shutting down businesses, reopening businesses, becoming an artist, learning an instrument, whatever their life takes on, getting to witness that and be an audience to that and being a coach to those moments, and to help people and to be kind to people and to give as much as I can. I think the biggest mistake that we oftentimes don't realize is that we are a society. We are a species. Our job as a species is the same as every other living organism on this planet, which is to ensure that the species is safe and gets to continue to procreate and move on. For some reason, we have broken that down to making sure that you're okay, that your family's okay. And we forget that we are all interconnected. And when we are doing bad as a society, we are doing bad as a species. And so I think to live a meaningful life, it's starting very small, which is in my control, my boys, and then expanding that human experience out as far as I can, to feeling like my time here as a member of that society was well spent in caring for other people. And if I continue to do those two things, I will feel very good about my time here on Earth.
Well, Michael, thank you so much. This has been such a good
Thank
conversation.
you.
I want to get into our lightning round of fun questions.
Okay.
So we'll start with one that's very relevant. What is one household chore that you actually enjoy and one that you try to avoid?
I don't know. Would this be considered a chore? I do bath time with my boys every night. I guess that would, I don't know if that's considered more of a care thing or a household chore, but if I can give that answer, that would be my answer because I understand that's super fleeting. Some days they're going to be showering on their own. They don't need me, but like we sing, we do songs together. My son's played again. And it's like, I just love it. I absolutely love it. I miss it when I'm gone. I just feel like it's such a special chapter of being a dad.
Yeah.
So like that is one household chore. Picking up dog poop isn't my favorite thing. That's for sure on the bottom of my list. Cooking is my favorite thing to do, but I don't find that as a chore because it's a pleasure to me. I like to cook for my family. But like loading the dishwasher and organizing it like a Lego set, like a Tetris set is like, it just feels
satisfying.
Like rewarding. Yeah. Very satisfying. So that would be my answer.
Yes, but I think bath time absolutely counts. And I think it gets back to what you were saying earlier about something that you get to do versus something that you have to do. And I think with bath time, it's such a choice. You know, you get to choose whether you get to do it or it's something that you have to do. And it sounds like you really see it as something that you get to do.
Well, I get to do it. And what's even crazier is if you go to Google and you search bath time and you hit images, it's all women in those photos. And so like it makes me super proud to think that my sons are going to have a very, very, very core memory that like I took the time every single day to clean them, to wash them, to love them, to care for them, and that's not just their mom's job to care and love them. And so, the same way if you search entrepreneurship, it's almost all men that come up in that photo. That's a crock of shit too. So I think anytime we can find these opportunities to reshape our children's minds, it's a fun exercise.
Yeah. What's a ritual that you all have in your home that means a lot to you?
Ooh. It changes a little bit, but every single night, either we take a family walk and ride our bikes down the street, or we live pretty close to a beach, which is awesome, and we walk the beach at sunset together as a family, my wife and the boys and I and our dogs. And it's a weird thing because I think my wife and I will keep on with that probably forever. And there's going to be a day where like that ritual exists without our children every single night. And so like I cherish it in such a fucking deep way because I know that we will keep doing that exercise of like reflecting at the end of the day and walking and listening to the birds and like having our closure to the day. And someday that's going to be one of those things that goes through phases of life, like it's the four of us and then maybe our kids sometimes come and it's just my wife and I, and then maybe our kids return with their children. And it's going to be something that I cherish probably to the end of my life.
What is a song that's always on in your house?
Oh, we listen to a lot of Jack Johnson. So we listen to vinyl records in our house. So we're there's basically two artists, and I feel like I'm about to be judged pretty hard. We
no
go back and
judgment
forth
here.
between like a lot of Jack Johnson. We listen to a lot of Jack Johnson, but my kids and we listen to a lot of Nirvana in this house as well.
And for the record, how old are your kids?
They're 2 and 4, 1.5 and 4. My wife has video footage of us all like rocking out at the breakfast table. I mean, my son knows the words to a lot of Nirvana songs, which may not be the healthiest parenting advice, but my kids like love Nirvana.
Love it. What is your household pet peeve?
Oh my God. I feel like I'm going to get in trouble for this. So my wife, she like will open a can of like sparkling water and take like 2 sips and put it back in the refrigerator. And
My
it
brother
drives
does
me
that.
nuts because like it's carbonated and it goes flat and she'll just like leave it there. It drives me off the wall. And I think we've reached a point almost 20 years together. I honestly think that the problem is now is that I think she does it purely to mess with me. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
she knows it drives me insane. That's probably way, way, way up there.
Who's someone you admire who you think really lives well?
Hmm. Damn, that's a really good question.
I love this one. I ask it every time because it's always a good answer.
You know, there's an aspect of me that wants to say like my parents, but I feel like that's like an easy like get out of jail free card. And mostly because I think that, you know, they have maintained a deep belief system on the importance of family. And they've been able to like really, I think, demonstrate that very few other things really matter. I would say up until like a lot of the scandals, my answer probably would have been Bill Gates to the extent that I really admired so much of his philanthropic work. I mean, I think if truth be told, in a dream scenario, my wife and I would want to give away as much as we possibly could. I really, really, really applaud people who do a better job for society and make like an effort for society. And so the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been like a huge, huge and like admiration to me. But I think he's had a couple really, really tough years. And so that's kind of like tainted me because I think that he hasn't been like the best husband and father along the way as well. I guess in a weird way, there's just not like that many like great public figures right now. I feel like we need a renaissance of good people. Right? Doesn't feel like there's like a lot of great public figures. It feels like we're like falling short as a society. So I don't know, actually. I don't think I could give a good, honest answer because outside of my parents, I feel like everyone is kind of like a little bit morally bankrupt right now.
There's absolutely an opportunity for new heroes.
I would think the world just needs people to care about the right shit. And we are in a really dark time, but I am very much fond of that belief that it's darkest right before the light. And I like to believe that the next 10 or 20 years, some people are going to emerge who society just remodels themselves after. And so who knows, hopefully you interview me again in 10 or 15 years and my answer changes and there's some bright light superstar who's making the world a better place just like on the moral compass aspect.
Agreed. What inspires you to live better?
My sons, no question. That is the easiest answer. I don't know. I think that they saved my life to the extent that I think I would have looked back and had a tremendous amount of regret on the old version of me. I really do see myself in this very weird before Christ, before children, after children version of myself. I think I've always been like a relatively nice person. I think I've been a relatively sympathetic and empathetic person, but I think that children have made me a softer, more loving, revalued, like time person. You know what I mean? Like they've just changed my life, saved me from regret, and I'm so indebted to them because of that.
What's one thing you've learned from them?
God, one thing? Can I answer that in a different way? I oftentimes have to remind myself that I am speaking to someone else's child. And I could never, ever, 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 ever imagine somebody talking poorly to my children. Nothing hurts me more than to think about somebody being a shit or an asshole to my kids. So I don't know if they like how to articulate how they've taught me that. But the depth of pain that I can create in my heart thinking about somebody hurting them is so profound. And I know in my heart that every parent feels the exact same way, and you are someone's daughter. And so I owe it to them. I owe it to them to talk to you in the same way I would speak to my own children, and to address you and respect you the same way I'd want someone to address and respect my own children. And I think that if we can somehow continue to not live our life through our eyes, but live our life through the eyes of our children, or to live our life through the eyes of another set of parents, or to live our life through someone else's eyes, you become a better version of yourself.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Michael Perry for welcoming us today. Follow along with Michael on LinkedIn and on Instagram at Michael Perry. I'm Kristen Twyford, and if you enjoyed our conversation, I hope you'll subscribe to Make Yourself at Home and leave us a review. Make Yourself at Home is presented by Nines, household management software that helps you manage your properties and everything that comes with them, so you can make the most of your time at home. Learn more at ninesliving.com.